Question 1. Performance analysis shows that the organization's primary mass notification system, a cloud-based platform, experienced significant latency during a recent simulated cyber attack exercise, delaying critical alert dissemination by several minutes. As the certified security leadership professional responsible for emergency preparedness, you need to recommend a revised communication strategy to the executive team. Which of the following approaches best addresses the identified vulnerability and aligns with regulatory expectations for resilient emergency communication? Option A. Implement a layered communication strategy that integrates on-premise radio communication for immediate tactical needs, a dedicated emergency communication system with redundant infrastructure, and the existing mass notification system as a supplementary channel, ensuring regular testing of all components. Option B. Reduce reliance on technological communication systems and increase the frequency of in-person briefings and manual alert dissemination methods to mitigate the risk of system failure. Option C. Invest in upgrading the existing cloud-based mass notification system to a premium tier with guaranteed uptime and faster message delivery, while decommissioning the older radio communication equipment. Option D. Focus solely on enhancing the organization's cybersecurity posture to prevent future cyber attacks from impacting the mass notification system, assuming this will resolve the latency issue. Correct answer is A. Implement a layered communication strategy that integrates on-premise radio communication for immediate tactical needs, a dedicated emergency communication system with redundant infrastructure, and the existing mass notification system as a supplementary channel, ensuring regular testing of all components. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge in security leadership, ensuring effective communication during a crisis, particularly when relying on technology that may be compromised. The professional challenge lies in balancing immediate operational needs with long-term resilience and compliance, all while managing stakeholder expectations and potential liabilities. Careful judgment is required to select a communication strategy that is both effective in the short term and legally sound in the long term, adhering to the specific regulatory framework governing the Certified Security Leadership Professional (CSLP) certification. The correct approach involves a multifaceted strategy that prioritizes redundancy and diverse communication channels, aligning with the principles of robust security and emergency preparedness mandated by relevant regulations. This approach acknowledges that no single system is infallible and that a layered defense in communication is essential. Specifically, it emphasizes the integration of radio communication for immediate, localized needs, emergency communication systems for broader alerts, and mass notification systems for widespread dissemination of information. This layered approach ensures that if one system fails, others can be utilized, thereby maintaining operational continuity and fulfilling the duty of care to protect personnel and assets. Regulatory frameworks often require organizations to have documented emergency response plans that include provisions for maintaining communication under adverse conditions, and this approach directly addresses those requirements by building resilience into the communication infrastructure. An incorrect approach that relies solely on a single, potentially vulnerable system, such as a cloud-based mass notification system, fails to meet the expected standards of resilience and preparedness. This approach is ethically problematic as it places undue reliance on a single point of failure, potentially leaving personnel uninformed and vulnerable during a critical event. From a regulatory perspective, such a reliance could be deemed negligent if it contravenes guidelines that mandate diverse and robust communication capabilities, especially if the chosen system is susceptible to the very threats the security leadership is meant to mitigate, e.g., cyber attacks, power outages. Another incorrect approach, focusing only on the immediate deployment of radio communication without considering broader notification capabilities, is also flawed. While radio is valuable for tactical communication, it may not be sufficient for informing all relevant parties, including off-site personnel or external stakeholders, about an unfolding emergency. This limited scope can lead to information gaps and hinder coordinated response efforts, potentially violating regulatory requirements for comprehensive emergency communication. Finally, an approach that prioritizes cost savings over system redundancy and effectiveness is professionally unsound and ethically questionable. Security leadership has a responsibility to advocate for the necessary resources to ensure the safety and security of the organization. Cutting corners on critical communication systems, especially in light of potential threats, demonstrates a failure in risk management and a disregard for the well-being of individuals, which can have severe legal and reputational consequences. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment of all communication systems, considering their vulnerabilities, dependencies, and effectiveness under various crisis scenarios. This assessment should be informed by regulatory requirements and best practices. The chosen strategy must then incorporate redundancy, diversity of channels, and regular testing and maintenance to ensure reliability. Furthermore, security leaders must be prepared to articulate the rationale for their communication strategies to stakeholders, justifying investments in resilient systems based on risk mitigation and compliance obligations. Question 2. The monitoring system demonstrates a significant increase in unauthorized access attempts to sensitive company data from internal sources. As a certified security leadership professional, CSLP, you are considering implementing more stringent monitoring protocols. Which leadership approach best balances the immediate security imperative with the long-term ethical considerations of employee trust and privacy, while adhering to professional standards? Option A. Implement enhanced monitoring with clear, transparent communication about the reasons, scope, and data handling procedures, emphasizing the shared responsibility for security. Option B. Increase direct oversight and control over employee digital activities, providing detailed instructions on acceptable behavior and strictly enforcing compliance. Option C. Frame the enhanced monitoring as a necessary step to achieve a higher level of organizational security, inspiring employees to embrace the changes for the greater good. Option D. Introduce a system of immediate disciplinary actions for any detected suspicious activity, coupled with a reward for reporting colleagues. The correct answer is A. Implement enhanced monitoring with clear, transparent communication about the reasons, scope, and data handling procedures, emphasizing the shared responsibility for security. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for security oversight with the ethical considerations of employee privacy and trust. The CSLP professional must navigate this situation by applying appropriate leadership theories that align with both organizational security objectives and ethical best practices, as well as any relevant regulatory frameworks governing data privacy and employee monitoring. The core tension lies in how to maintain a secure environment without fostering a climate of suspicion or violating established norms of workplace conduct. The correct approach involves employing a leadership style that prioritizes transparency, ethical conduct, and employee well-being while still addressing security risks. This aligns with authentic leadership, which emphasizes self-awareness, relational transparency, and balanced processing of information. An authentic leader would openly communicate the reasons for enhanced monitoring, explain the data being collected, and ensure that the monitoring is proportionate to the identified risks. This approach fosters trust and can lead to greater employee buy-in and cooperation, ultimately enhancing security. Furthermore, it aligns with principles of good governance and ethical data handling, which are often implicitly or explicitly supported by professional codes of conduct and general principles of fairness and respect in the workplace. An approach based on transactional leadership would be incorrect because it focuses on a system of rewards and punishments, which might lead to compliance but not necessarily genuine security awareness or trust. This could be perceived as overly punitive and could damage morale. A purely transactional approach might also fail to address the underlying reasons for potential security breaches, focusing only on reactive measures. Adopting a purely situational leadership approach without careful consideration of the ethical implications would also be problematic. While situational leadership advocates for adapting style to the situation and follower readiness, simply increasing directive behavior, e.g., strict monitoring, without addressing the ethical dimension or employee concerns would be a failure. It risks being perceived as authoritarian and could undermine trust, which is crucial for effective security leadership. A transformational leadership approach, while generally positive, could be misapplied if the leader frames the enhanced monitoring solely as a means to inspire a shared vision of security without adequately addressing the privacy concerns or providing clear boundaries. While transformational leaders aim to inspire, the implementation must be grounded in ethical considerations and respect for individuals. Without this, the inspiration could be perceived as manipulative. The professional decision-making process should involve a thorough risk assessment to identify the specific security threats, followed by an ethical review of proposed monitoring measures. This should include consulting relevant organizational policies, professional codes of conduct, and any applicable legal or regulatory guidance on employee monitoring and data privacy. The leader should then engage in open communication with employees, explaining the rationale, scope, and limitations of the monitoring. The chosen leadership approach should support this transparent and ethical communication, fostering a collaborative approach to security. Question 3. Risk assessment procedures indicate a significant increase in the likelihood of a targeted phishing campaign leading to data exfiltration, with a moderate potential impact on operational continuity. The security team has identified several potential mitigation strategies, ranging from advanced technical controls to enhanced user awareness training. The organization is also facing budget constraints for the upcoming fiscal year. As the certified security leadership professional, what is the most appropriate leadership approach to address this identified risk? Option A. Make a unilateral decision to implement a single, low-cost technical solution that addresses the immediate technical vulnerability without consulting with the security team or other departments, and then inform them of the decision. Option B. Immediately implement the most advanced and expensive technical security controls available to ensure complete protection against the phishing threat, regardless of budget limitations or operational disruption. Option C. Develop a comprehensive mitigation plan that includes a mix of technical and human-centric controls. Clearly communicate the risks and propose solutions to senior management and affected departments, and delegate specific implementation tasks to relevant team members with defined objectives and support. Option D. Prioritize cost reduction by deferring the implementation of any new security measures, assuming the risk is manageable and can be addressed with existing, minimal resources. The correct answer is C. Develop a comprehensive mitigation plan that includes a mix of technical and human-centric controls, clearly communicate the risks and propose solutions to senior management and affected departments, and delegate specific implementation tasks to relevant team members with defined objectives and support. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for security leaders, balancing the need for robust security measures with the practical realities of resource constraints and operational impact. The leader must not only identify risks, but also effectively communicate their significance, gain buy-in for mitigation strategies, and delegate responsibilities appropriately, all while maintaining team morale and strategic alignment. The pressure to deliver results under budget adds a layer of complexity, requiring astute decision-making and persuasive communication. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured, collaborative, and transparent process. It begins with a thorough risk assessment, followed by the development of a clear, prioritized mitigation plan that considers both technical and human factors. Crucially, it emphasizes effective communication of findings and proposed solutions to stakeholders, including senior management and affected teams. Delegation of specific tasks to appropriate personnel, with clear objectives and support, is essential for successful implementation. Motivation is fostered by explaining the why behind the changes and involving the team in problem solving. This approach aligns with ethical leadership principles of accountability, transparency, and due diligence, and is implicitly supported by the principles of good governance and risk management expected of security professionals, even without specific CSLP-mandated regulations being cited here. The focus is on achieving security objectives through informed, collaborative action. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that solely focuses on implementing the most technically advanced solutions without considering cost, operational impact, or stakeholder buy-in is flawed. This demonstrates a lack of strategic thinking and poor delegation, as it likely overburdens a single team or individual and fails to address potential resistance. It neglects the motivational aspect by not explaining the rationale to those affected. An approach that prioritizes cost-cutting above all else, leading to the dismissal of significant identified risks without adequate justification or alternative mitigation, is ethically unsound and demonstrates poor leadership. This fails to uphold the duty of care expected of a security leader and could expose the organization to unacceptable levels of risk, potentially violating implicit professional obligations to protect assets and information. It also shows a failure in decision-making by not adequately weighing risk against cost. An approach that involves making unilateral decisions without consulting relevant teams or stakeholders, and then attempting to impose solutions, is likely to lead to resentment, decreased morale, and ineffective implementation. This demonstrates a failure in communication and delegation, as it bypasses opportunities for collaboration and expertise from those on the ground. It also indicates a lack of strategic thinking by not leveraging the collective knowledge of the organization. Professional reasoning. Security leaders must adopt a holistic approach to risk management. This involves a continuous cycle of identification, assessment, mitigation, and review. Effective leadership in this context requires strong communication skills to articulate risks and solutions, delegation to empower teams and ensure efficient task management, and motivational techniques to foster a security-aware culture. Strategic thinking is paramount to align security initiatives with business objectives, and sound decision-making, informed by data and stakeholder input, is essential for navigating complex challenges. When faced with resource constraints, leaders must prioritize risks based on their potential impact and likelihood, and develop pragmatic, cost-effective mitigation strategies, always ensuring that critical risks are adequately addressed. Question 4. Process analysis reveals that a financial services firm is seeking to enhance its information security posture. The Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, is tasked with selecting a risk assessment methodology to guide this effort. Considering the firm's regulatory obligations under relevant financial sector guidelines and its commitment to protecting sensitive client data, which of the following approaches represents the most effective and compliant strategy for the CISO to adopt? Option A. Prioritize the adoption of cutting-edge security technologies, such as advanced AI-driven threat detection systems, and then conduct a post-implementation review to identify any residual risks. Option B. Focus solely on analyzing past security incidents to identify recurring patterns and vulnerabilities, assuming that historical data is the most reliable predictor of future threats. Option C. Implement a hybrid risk assessment methodology that combines qualitative and quantitative analysis, systematically identifying critical assets, potential threats, existing vulnerabilities, and the likelihood and impact of their exploitation to prioritize mitigation efforts. Option D. Concentrate the risk assessment efforts exclusively on identifying and mitigating the most catastrophic, low-probability threat scenarios, deeming other risks as secondary. The correct answer is C. Implement a hybrid risk assessment methodology that combines qualitative and quantitative analysis, systematically identifying critical assets, potential threats, existing vulnerabilities, and the likelihood and impact of their exploitation, to prioritize mitigation efforts. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in security leadership, balancing the need for robust risk assessment with the practical constraints of resource allocation and organizational priorities. The core difficulty lies in selecting a risk assessment methodology that is both comprehensive enough to identify significant threats and vulnerabilities, and efficient enough to be implemented effectively within the organization's operational context. A leader must demonstrate not only technical understanding of risk management frameworks, but also strategic judgment in applying them. The correct approach involves selecting a methodology that aligns with the organization's specific risk appetite, regulatory obligations, and operational environment. This typically means choosing a structured, repeatable process that systematically identifies assets, threats, vulnerabilities, likelihood, and impact, leading to prioritized mitigation strategies. For a certified security leadership professional, CSLP, this aligns with the ethical imperative to protect organizational assets and ensure business continuity, as well as any relevant regulatory frameworks that mandate risk-based security programs. The emphasis is on a proactive, informed approach to security investment and control implementation. An approach that relies solely on historical incident data without forward-looking threat intelligence is flawed because it is reactive rather than proactive. It fails to account for emerging threats and evolving vulnerabilities, potentially leaving the organization exposed to novel risks. This can lead to regulatory noncompliance if the chosen framework is deemed insufficient by oversight bodies. An approach that focuses exclusively on high-impact, low-likelihood events while neglecting more frequent, moderate impact risks is also problematic. While catastrophic events warrant attention, a balanced risk assessment must consider the cumulative effect of smaller, more common incidents, which can also significantly disrupt operations and incur substantial costs. This imbalance can lead to misallocation of resources and a failure to address a broader spectrum of potential harm. An approach that prioritizes the implementation of the most technically advanced security solutions without a preceding thorough risk assessment is fundamentally unsound. This technology-first mindset often results in expensive, unnecessary controls that do not address the organization's actual risks, leading to wasted resources and potentially creating new vulnerabilities through complexity. It bypasses the crucial step of understanding what needs to be protected and from what, which is the bedrock of effective risk management. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a structured, risk-based approach. Leaders should first understand the organization's objectives and its risk appetite. Then, they should evaluate available risk assessment methodologies against these factors, considering their comprehensiveness, scalability, and alignment with regulatory requirements. The chosen methodology should facilitate the identification of key risks, the prioritization of mitigation efforts based on potential impact and likelihood, and the continuous monitoring and review of the risk landscape. This iterative process ensures that security investments are strategic, effective, and aligned with the organization's overall business goals. Question 5. Governance review demonstrates that the organization's current security awareness training program is largely delivered annually through lengthy, text-heavy modules with minimal interactive elements, resulting in low employee engagement and a high rate of completion without demonstrable behavioral change. As the CISO, you are tasked with improving this program within a limited budget and need to propose a new strategy. Which of the following approaches best addresses the identified shortcomings while adhering to best practices for security leadership and regulatory expectations? Option A. Continue with the annual training model, but significantly increase the length and technical depth of the modules to ensure comprehensive coverage of all potential threats, requiring mandatory completion with no exceptions. Option B. Transition to a highly technical, in-depth training program delivered exclusively to IT and security personnel, assuming that this group will then disseminate critical information to other departments. Option C. Implement a phased approach to security awareness training, starting with high-risk areas such as phishing and social engineering, and incorporating a variety of engaging methodologies like short videos, gamified modules, and simulated phishing exercises, with regular, bite-sized updates throughout the year. Option D. Focus solely on ensuring that all employees complete the existing annual training modules and document completion rates meticulously to satisfy compliance auditors, without altering the content or delivery method. The correct answer is C. Implement a phased approach to security awareness training, starting with high-risk areas such as phishing and social engineering, and incorporating a variety of engaging methodologies like short videos, gamified modules, and simulated phishing exercises, with regular, bite-sized updates throughout the year. Explanation. This scenario presents a common ethical dilemma in security leadership, balancing the need for comprehensive security awareness training with the practical constraints of budget and employee engagement. The challenge lies in ensuring that training is not only compliant with regulatory requirements, but also genuinely effective in changing behavior and fostering a security-conscious culture, without alienating employees or becoming a mere checkbox exercise. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that maximizes impact within these limitations. The correct approach involves a phased, risk-based implementation of training, prioritizing critical areas and leveraging diverse, engaging methodologies. This strategy acknowledges that a one-size-fits-all approach is often ineffective and resource-intensive. By focusing on high-risk areas first and incorporating interactive elements, the program is more likely to resonate with employees and achieve its objectives. This aligns with the principles of due diligence and reasonable security practices, often implicitly or explicitly required by regulatory frameworks that mandate protecting sensitive information and preventing breaches. The ethical imperative is to provide training that is genuinely protective, not just superficially compliant. An approach that relies solely on annual, generic, and unengaging training fails to meet the dynamic nature of security threats and the diverse learning styles of employees. This can lead to low retention and a false sense of security, potentially violating regulatory expectations for effective security controls. It also ethically falls short by not adequately preparing employees to identify and respond to emerging threats. Implementing training that is overly technical and inaccessible to the majority of the workforce, while potentially thorough for IT staff, neglects the broader employee base who are often the first line of defense. This creates significant security gaps and can be seen as a failure to provide adequate awareness to all personnel, which is a common regulatory expectation. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of consideration for the varied roles and technical proficiencies within the organization. Focusing exclusively on compliance metrics without measuring actual behavioral change or program effectiveness is a superficial approach. While it may satisfy auditors in the short term, it does not genuinely enhance the organization's security posture. This can lead to regulatory scrutiny if a breach occurs due to a lack of actual security awareness, and ethically, it prioritizes form over substance, failing to protect the organization and its stakeholders effectively. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the regulatory landscape and specific requirements for security awareness training within the relevant jurisdiction. 2. Conducting a thorough risk assessment to identify the most critical security threats and vulnerabilities relevant to the organization and its employees. 3. Assessing the current state of employee security awareness and identifying gaps. 4. Developing a training strategy that is risk-based, tailored to different employee roles and learning styles, and incorporates engaging methodologies. 5. Establishing clear metrics for evaluating the effectiveness of the training program, focusing on behavioral change and impact on security incidents, not just completion rates. 6. Securing adequate resources and executive sponsorship to support the program. 7. Continuously reviewing and updating the training program based on evolving threats, technological changes, and feedback. Question 6. System analysis indicates a critical security incident has occurred, potentially involving unauthorized access to sensitive customer data. The executive team is demanding immediate updates and a clear timeline for resolution, while the technical team is focused on containing the breach and restoring services. As the security leader, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action to ensure both effective incident response and regulatory compliance? Option A. Prioritize the immediate restoration of affected systems to minimize business disruption, deferring detailed investigation and reporting until operations are fully normalized. Option B. Initiate containment and eradication procedures, meticulously preserving all digital evidence, and commence a structured investigation to determine the scope and impact before any external reporting. Option C. Immediately issue a public statement acknowledging a potential data breach and outlining preliminary containment efforts, while simultaneously initiating a full forensic investigation. Option D. Delay all external communication and reporting until the investigation is exhaustively complete, even if it means exceeding regulatory notification deadlines. The correct answer is C. Immediately issue a public statement acknowledging a potential data breach and outlining preliminary containment efforts, while simultaneously initiating a full forensic investigation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in security leadership, balancing the immediate need to contain a security incident with the long-term requirements for thorough investigation and accurate reporting. The pressure to provide swift updates to stakeholders, coupled with the potential for significant business impact, can lead to rushed decisions. A security leader must navigate this pressure while adhering to established incident response frameworks and regulatory obligations, ensuring that the response is both effective and compliant. The challenge lies in maintaining objectivity and diligence under duress, preventing premature conclusions or incomplete data from compromising the integrity of the investigation and subsequent reporting. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves initiating a structured incident response process that prioritizes containment and eradication, while simultaneously gathering evidence for a comprehensive investigation. This approach aligns with the principles of a robust Security Operations Center (SOC) and incident response plan, which typically mandate a phased methodology. Specifically, it emphasizes the importance of preserving evidence integrity from the outset, a critical requirement for any subsequent legal or regulatory scrutiny. This methodical process ensures that all relevant data is collected, analyzed, and documented, leading to accurate root cause analysis and informed reporting. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing data breach notification and incident reporting, e.g., GDPR if applicable to the exam's jurisdiction, or similar national data protection laws, often mandate timely and accurate reporting based on a thorough understanding of the incident's scope and impact. This approach directly supports compliance by ensuring that reporting is based on verified facts, not speculation. Incorrect approach is analysis. Focusing solely on immediate public disclosure without a confirmed understanding of the incident's scope and impact is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This premature disclosure can lead to misinformation, panic among customers, and potential legal repercussions for making unsubstantiated claims. Bypasses the crucial investigative phase necessary to determine what data, if any, was compromised and who was affected. Prioritizing the immediate restoration of services over evidence preservation, while seemingly efficient in the short term, poses a severe risk. This action can irrevocably destroy critical forensic data, rendering a thorough investigation impossible. This failure to preserve evidence directly contravenes regulatory requirements that often mandate the ability to reconstruct events and demonstrate due diligence in responding to security incidents. It also undermines the organization's ability to identify the root cause and implement effective preventative measures, leading to potential repeat incidents. Delaying any form of reporting until the investigation is exhaustively complete, even if the incident has clear immediate implications, can also be problematic. While thoroughness is essential, prolonged delays can violate regulatory timelines for notification and reporting, particularly in cases involving personal data breaches. This can result in fines and reputational damage. It also fails to acknowledge the ethical obligation to inform affected parties and relevant authorities in a timely manner when a security event of consequence has occurred. Professional reasoning. Security leaders should employ a decision-making framework that integrates established incident response methodologies with a clear understanding of legal and regulatory obligations. This framework should include 1. Incident detection and analysis, rapidly identifying and assessing the nature and severity of the incident. 2. Containment, eradication, and recovery, taking immediate steps to limit the damage and restore operations, while meticulously preserving evidence. 3. Investigation and forensics, conducting a thorough analysis to determine the root cause, scope, and impact. 4. Reporting and communication, preparing accurate and timely reports for internal stakeholders, regulators, and affected parties, adhering to all legal and contractual requirements. This structured approach ensures that decisions are data-driven, compliant, and ethically sound, fostering trust and resilience. Question 7. Investigation of a recent internal security audit at a UK-based financial services firm has revealed a critical vulnerability in the customer data management system, leading to a finding of non-compliance with specific requirements of the Data Protection Act 2018 and the General Data Protection Regulation. The audit report details the nature of the vulnerability and its potential impact on the confidentiality and integrity of personal data. As the CISO, you must determine the most appropriate immediate course of action. Option A. Implement a broad, company-wide security update across all systems to address potential underlying issues, deferring detailed remediation of the specific vulnerability until the next scheduled audit. Option B. Request the audit team to reevaluate the finding, suggesting that the identified vulnerability is not significant enough to warrant immediate action given current operational pressures. Option C. Immediately initiate a comprehensive remediation plan, prioritizing fixes based on the severity of the identified risks to personal data, and document all actions taken in accordance with the accountability principle. Option D. Inform senior management of the finding and propose a phased remediation approach to be implemented over the next fiscal year, contingent on budget approval. The correct answer is C. Immediately initiate a comprehensive remediation plan, prioritizing fixes based on the severity of the identified risks to personal data, and document all actions taken in accordance with the accountability principle. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in security leadership, balancing the need for robust security auditing with the practicalities of compliance and resource allocation. The professional challenge lies in interpreting and applying the relevant regulatory framework, specifically the UK's Data Protection Act 2018, DPA 2018, and the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, as it applies in the UK to a real-world situation where a critical audit finding has immediate implications. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the response is both compliant and effective in mitigating risk. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process that prioritizes remediation based on the severity of the identified risks, directly addressing the findings of the security audit in alignment with DPA 2018 and GDPR principles of data protection by design and by default, and accountability. This approach ensures that the organization not only acknowledges the audit findings, but also takes concrete, prioritized steps to rectify noncompliance, thereby demonstrating a commitment to data subject rights and regulatory obligations. It involves engaging relevant stakeholders, developing a remediation plan with clear timelines and responsibilities, and documenting all actions taken. This aligns with the accountability principle under Article 5(2) of GDPR and the ICO's guidance on data protection impact assessments and audits. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate, broad system changes without a risk-based assessment fails to address the specific findings of the audit effectively and may lead to inefficient use of resources. This approach risks overlooking the most critical vulnerabilities and could result in a superficial fix that does not satisfy regulatory requirements for demonstrable compliance. It also fails to adhere to the principle of proportionality in data processing and security measures. Another incorrect approach that involves delaying remediation until the next scheduled audit cycle is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This demonstrates a lack of proactive security management and a disregard for the potential harm to data subjects resulting from the identified vulnerabilities. Such a delay would likely be viewed by the Information Commissioner's Office, ICO, as a failure to implement appropriate technical and organizational measures, potentially leading to substantial fines under DPA 2018 and GDPR. Finally, an approach that attempts to downplay or ignore the audit findings to avoid immediate scrutiny or cost is professionally unacceptable and ethically unsound. This not only violates the principle of accountability, but also exposes the organization to significant legal and reputational risks. It undermines the integrity of the security program and the trust placed in the security leadership. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Thoroughly understanding the audit findings and their implications under the relevant regulatory framework, DPA 2018/GDPR. 2. Conducting a risk assessment to prioritize remediation efforts based on the potential impact on data subjects and the business. 3. Developing a clear, actionable remediation plan with defined responsibilities and timelines. 4. Documenting all actions taken and communicating progress to relevant stakeholders, and if necessary, the ICO. 5. Ensuring that remediation efforts are integrated into ongoing security management processes. Question 8. Quality control measures reveal that a new security leader is tasked with developing a comprehensive security program for a rapidly growing organization. The leader has a limited time frame and budget, but must ensure the program is compliant with all relevant regulations for the Certified Security Leadership Professional, CSLP, exams jurisdiction. Which of the following approaches best balances these competing demands while establishing a robust foundation for the security program? Option A. Conduct a thorough risk assessment, develop foundational security policies and procedures based on identified risks and regulatory requirements, and then design the security architecture to support these policies. Option B. Adopt generic industry, best practice security frameworks without a specific risk assessment or consideration of the CSLP jurisdiction's unique regulatory landscape. Option C. Focus on creating a detailed security architecture, including network diagrams and access controls, before defining specific security policies or conducting a formal risk assessment. Option D. Immediately research and procure the latest advanced security technologies, assuming they will provide the necessary protection and compliance, and then develop policies around their use. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough risk assessment, Develop foundational security policies and procedures based on identified risks and regulatory requirements, and then design the security architecture to support these policies. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for a robust security program with the practical constraints of resource allocation and the imperative to adhere to established regulatory frameworks. A security leader must demonstrate strategic foresight, ethical conduct, and a deep understanding of applicable laws and guidelines. The pressure to deliver a comprehensive plan quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise long-term effectiveness and compliance. The correct approach involves a systematic, risk-based methodology that prioritizes the development of foundational security policies and procedures, directly informed by a thorough risk assessment, and aligned with the specific regulatory requirements of the Certified Security Leadership Professional, CSLP, exam's jurisdiction. This ensures that the security program is not only comprehensive, but also legally sound and ethically defensible. By focusing on establishing clear policies and procedures first, the organization builds a solid framework upon which a more detailed security architecture can be designed, ensuring that all subsequent design decisions are grounded in identified risks and regulatory obligations. This aligns with best practices in security governance, which emphasize a top-down, policy-driven approach to security program development. An incorrect approach that relies solely on adopting industry best practices without a specific risk assessment or regulatory alignment fails to address the unique threat landscape and legal obligations of the organization. This can lead to misallocation of resources, overlooking critical vulnerabilities, and potential noncompliance with specific CSLP jurisdiction regulations. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes the implementation of advanced security technologies before establishing clear policies and procedures is also flawed. This technology-first mindset often results in expensive solutions that are poorly integrated, difficult to manage, and may not effectively address the core security risks or meet regulatory mandates. It can also create a false sense of security. Finally, an approach that focuses on developing a detailed security architecture without first defining overarching policies and conducting a risk assessment is fundamentally unsound. Without a clear understanding of the organization's risk appetite and regulatory obligations, the architecture may be misaligned, inefficient, and fail to provide adequate protection. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that begins with understanding the specific regulatory environment and the organization's unique risk profile. This involves conducting a comprehensive risk assessment, followed by the development of clear, actionable security policies and procedures that directly address identified risks and comply with all applicable laws and guidelines. Only then should the design of the security architecture commence, ensuring that it supports and enforces the established policies and procedures. Continuous review and adaptation are also crucial to maintain program effectiveness and compliance. Question 9. Strategic planning requires a CSLP to anticipate and mitigate potential ethical risks. When faced with a situation where a proposed security technology solution, while highly effective, has been developed by a vendor with a history of questionable data privacy practices, which of the following approaches best demonstrates ethical leadership in the strategic planning process? Option A. Commission an independent, in-depth ethical and compliance audit of the vendor's data privacy practices and governance, and integrate the findings into the risk assessment and decision-making process for selecting the technology solution. Option B. Delegate the decision-making responsibility to the procurement department, trusting their judgment to balance cost and technical merit without explicit ethical guidance. Option C. Proceed with the vendor's solution due to its superior technical capabilities, assuming the vendor has improved its practices and focusing solely on the immediate security benefits. Option D. Reject the vendor outright due to their past history, even if it means compromising on the effectiveness of the security solution and potentially increasing organizational risk. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the vendor's solution due to its superior technical capabilities, assuming the vendor has improved its practices and focusing solely on the immediate security benefits. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between achieving organizational objectives and upholding ethical leadership principles. CSLP is expected to navigate situations where business pressures might tempt a deviation from integrity, accountability, and responsibility. The core of the challenge lies in making decisions that are not only effective in achieving security goals, but also demonstrably ethical and defensible under the relevant regulatory framework. Careful judgment is required to balance stakeholder interests, legal obligations, and the organization's ethical standing. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent integration of ethical considerations into the strategic planning process, utilizing a recognized ethical decision-making framework. This ensures that integrity is maintained by openly addressing potential ethical dilemmas. Accountability is established through clear lines of responsibility for ethical conduct, and responsibility is demonstrated by prioritizing ethical outcomes alongside operational success. The chosen framework provides a structured method for analyzing the situation, identifying ethical issues, evaluating alternatives, and making a justifiable decision that aligns with the CSLP professional obligations and the governing regulatory landscape. This approach is specifically justified by the CSLP mandate to lead with integrity and uphold the highest ethical standards, as implicitly and explicitly required by professional codes of conduct and the underlying principles of good governance that inform security leadership. An approach that prioritizes expediency over ethical due diligence fails by neglecting the fundamental requirement of integrity. This can lead to decisions that, while seemingly efficient in the short term, create long-term reputational damage and potential legal liabilities. For instance, overlooking potential conflicts of interest or failing to conduct thorough ethical risk assessments undermines accountability, as it creates an environment where unethical behavior can go unchecked. Similarly, an approach that delegates ethical responsibility without clear oversight or fails to establish mechanisms for reporting and addressing ethical concerns demonstrates a lack of responsibility. This can result in a culture where ethical lapses are normalized, and the organization becomes vulnerable to breaches of trust and regulatory noncompliance. Relying solely on personal intuition without a structured ethical framework also poses a significant risk, as it lacks the objectivity and rigor necessary for defensible decision-making. In complex security leadership contexts, professionals should employ a systematic ethical decision-making process. This typically involves identifying the ethical issue, gathering relevant facts, identifying stakeholders and their interests, considering ethical principles and values, exploring alternative courses of action, evaluating the consequences of each alternative, making a decision, and reflecting on the outcome. This structured approach ensures that decisions are well-reasoned, transparent, and aligned with both professional ethics and regulatory requirements. Question 10. When evaluating a potential criminal act within the organization, what is the most appropriate process optimization strategy for a security leader to ensure adherence to criminal justice system procedures and relevant criminal statutes, thereby maximizing the potential for successful prosecution while safeguarding organizational interests? Option A. Initiate an internal investigation that focuses solely on disciplinary actions and organizational policy violations, disregarding the potential criminal nature of the act and the need for law enforcement involvement. Option B. Immediately secure and document all potential evidence, establish a strict chain of custody, and promptly notify and cooperate fully with the relevant law enforcement agency, seeking their guidance on further investigative steps and evidence handling. Option C. Collect and preserve all potential evidence independently, without involving law enforcement, and then decide whether to disclose it to authorities based on the perceived benefit to the organization. Option D. Conduct an immediate, in-depth interrogation of the suspected individual to obtain a confession, confiscating any personal devices that may contain relevant information without prior legal authorization. The correct answer is B. Immediately secure and document all potential evidence, establish a strict chain of custody, and promptly notify and cooperate fully with the relevant law enforcement agency, seeking their guidance on further investigative steps and evidence handling. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a security leader due to the inherent tension between the need to protect organizational assets and the imperative to adhere strictly to criminal justice procedures. The leader must navigate the complexities of evidence handling, chain of custody, and the rights of individuals suspected of criminal activity, all while ensuring that any investigation does not compromise future legal proceedings. The risk of improperly obtained evidence leading to the exclusion of critical information in court, or even civil liability for the organization, necessitates a meticulous and legally sound approach. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and application of the relevant criminal statutes and procedural rules governing investigations within the specified jurisdiction. This means prioritizing the preservation of evidence in a manner that maintains its admissibility in court, respecting the rights of individuals, and cooperating with law enforcement agencies in a structured and legally compliant manner. Specifically, this involves documenting all actions, ensuring proper authorization for searches or seizures, and maintaining an unbroken chain of custody for any evidence collected. This aligns with the principles of due process and the rules of evidence, which are fundamental to the criminal justice system. An incorrect approach that involves immediate, unauthorized interrogation of a suspect without informing them of their rights, such as the right to remain silent or the right to legal counsel, directly violates established criminal procedure. This can lead to the suppression of any statements made by the suspect, rendering them inadmissible in court and potentially jeopardizing the entire case. Another incorrect approach, such as the unauthorized seizure or tampering with evidence, not only compromises the integrity of the investigation, but can also lead to criminal charges against the individuals involved and severe reputational damage to the organization. Furthermore, failing to involve or properly cooperate with law enforcement agencies when a crime is suspected, or attempting to conduct an investigation that usurps the role of the police, can lead to legal entanglements and the mishandling of critical evidence. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the nature of the suspected offense and its potential criminal implications. This should be followed by an immediate consultation with legal counsel or the appropriate law enforcement agency to understand the legal boundaries and requirements for investigation and evidence collection. All actions taken must be documented meticulously, and a clear chain of custody must be established and maintained for any evidence. The guiding principle should always be to act within the bounds of the law, respecting individual rights, and ensuring that any investigative steps taken are legally defensible and contribute to a fair and just legal process. Question 11. Market research demonstrates that effective security leaders often face situations where a high-performing team member begins to exhibit a decline in performance due to personal challenges. As a certified security leadership professional, CSLP, how should you, as a leader, best address a situation where a trusted team member's performance is suffering due to undisclosed personal issues, balancing the need for operational effectiveness with supportive leadership? Option A. Publicly acknowledge the team member's recent performance struggles during a team meeting, encouraging them to share their challenges to foster transparency and collective problem-solving. Option B. Delegate the responsibility of addressing the performance issue to a junior team member, believing that a less senior perspective might be more effective in identifying the problem. Option C. Immediately issue a formal written warning to the team member, citing the decline in performance and the need for immediate improvement to avoid further disciplinary action, without inquiring about personal circumstances. Option D. Schedule a private meeting with the team member to express concern about their recent performance, actively listen to understand any underlying personal issues, and collaboratively develop a plan for improvement that includes offering support and resources, while clearly outlining performance expectations. The correct answer is D. Schedule a private meeting with the team member to express concern about their recent performance, actively listen to understand any underlying personal issues, and collaboratively develop a plan for improvement that includes offering support and resources, while clearly outlining performance expectations. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a security leader to navigate a complex interpersonal situation that directly impacts team morale, operational effectiveness, and adherence to ethical leadership principles, all within the context of the Certified Security Leadership Professional (CSLP) framework. The leader must balance the need for decisive action with the imperative to foster a supportive and high-performing team environment. The core challenge lies in addressing a subordinate's underperformance stemming from personal issues without resorting to punitive measures that could be perceived as lacking empathy or failing to support employee well-being, which are implicit in ethical leadership and CSLP expectations. The correct approach involves a leader demonstrating strong self-awareness by recognizing their own potential biases and emotional reactions, followed by self-regulation to manage those emotions constructively. The leader then utilizes empathy to understand the subordinate's situation and motivation to support their improvement. Finally, social skills are employed to engage in a supportive, yet firm, conversation focused on performance and development. This approach aligns with CSLP principles of ethical leadership, which emphasize fostering a positive work environment, supporting employee growth, and maintaining professional integrity. It also implicitly aligns with general best practices in leadership that encourage understanding and support for employees facing personal challenges, thereby promoting long-term team cohesion and productivity. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate performance metrics without acknowledging or exploring the underlying personal issues demonstrates a failure in empathy and social skills. This can lead to a breakdown in trust and morale, potentially violating ethical leadership expectations of treating individuals with respect and dignity. Another incorrect approach that involves immediately escalating to disciplinary action without attempting a supportive intervention shows a lack of self-regulation and empathy, potentially creating a hostile work environment, and failing to uphold the leader's responsibility to develop their team members. A third incorrect approach that involves ignoring the performance issue altogether due to discomfort or a desire to avoid conflict demonstrates a failure in self-awareness and social skills, ultimately undermining the leader's authority and the team's overall effectiveness, and failing to meet the CSLP standard of proactive and responsible leadership. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a structured approach. First, acknowledge and understand the situation and its potential impact. Second, assess personal emotional responses and regulate them. Third, gather information to understand the root cause, employing empathy. Fourth, plan a communication strategy that is supportive yet addresses performance expectations. And fifth, execute the plan with clear, constructive feedback and offer appropriate support or resources. Question 12. Analysis of a large-scale cyber attack targeting a critical infrastructure organization, leading to significant service disruption and potential data breaches, requires a security leader to implement a robust crisis management strategy. Considering the Certified Security Leadership Professional (CSLP) framework, which of the following approaches best demonstrates effective leadership during this emergency? Option A. Focus solely on technical containment and remediation efforts, deferring any external communication until the technical issues are fully resolved to avoid alarming the public. Option B. Immediately establish a clear incident command system (ICS) structure, delegate responsibilities according to predefined roles, and initiate a coordinated crisis communication plan that provides regular, factual updates to internal and external stakeholders. Option C. Issue a brief, generic public statement acknowledging an incident without providing specific details, while prioritizing internal stakeholder updates over external ones. Option D. Empower individual technical teams to manage their respective areas of the incident response without a centralized command structure, allowing for rapid, decentralized problem solving. The correct answer is B. Immediately establish a clear incident command system (ICS) structure, delegate responsibilities according to predefined roles, and initiate a coordinated crisis communication plan that provides regular, factual updates to internal and external stakeholders. Explanation. This scenario presents a significant professional challenge due to the inherent uncertainty, high stakes, and rapid evolution of information during a major security incident. A CSLP must demonstrate effective leadership under extreme pressure, balancing immediate operational needs with strategic communication and adherence to established protocols. The challenge lies in making timely, informed decisions with incomplete data while maintaining stakeholder confidence and ensuring compliance with relevant security leadership principles and potential regulatory frameworks governing incident response and communication. The correct approach involves establishing and actively managing an incident command system (ICS) structure, ensuring clear lines of authority and communication. This aligns with best practices in crisis management, emphasizing a standardized, on-scene, all-hazards approach to incident management. The regulatory and ethical justification stems from the principle of organized, efficient response, which is often implicitly or explicitly supported by industry standards and potentially by specific organizational policies or broader security governance frameworks that mandate structured incident response. Effective crisis communication, integrated with the ICS, ensures that accurate, timely information is disseminated to relevant parties, mitigating panic and misinformation, which is a core responsibility of security leadership. An incorrect approach would be to bypass or inadequately implement the ICS, leading to confusion, duplicated efforts, and delayed response. This fails to meet the organizational and potentially regulatory expectation for a structured and coordinated incident response. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize internal communication or operational tasks over timely and transparent external communication, or to communicate without a clear, unified message. This can erode trust, create public relations crises, and potentially violate ethical obligations to inform stakeholders appropriately and promptly, as often expected in security leadership roles. A further incorrect approach is to make unilateral decisions without consulting established crisis management plans or key stakeholders, demonstrating a lack of strategic foresight and adherence to established governance, which is a failure in leadership accountability. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with immediate situational assessment, followed by the activation of predefined crisis management plans, including the establishment of an ICS. This framework emphasizes clear roles, responsibilities, and communication channels. Regular, structured briefings and debriefings are crucial. The decision-making process should be iterative, allowing for adjustments based on evolving information and the effectiveness of implemented strategies, always with an eye toward ethical considerations and the overarching goal of protecting assets and personnel while maintaining public trust. Question 13. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a comprehensive, proactive background screening process for all potential hires in security-sensitive roles is a prudent investment in organizational safety, but the specific scope of this screening must be carefully defined to avoid legal pitfalls. Considering the principles of employment law and employee rights in the United States, which of the following approaches to background screening for a senior security analyst position, responsible for managing access to critical infrastructure data, best balances organizational security needs with legal and ethical obligations? Option A. Rely on informal references and publicly available information only without formal consent to gauge a candidate's suitability. Option B. Perform an extensive social media sweep, including private profiles, and inquire about past medical conditions and personal lifestyle choices to assess overall character. Option C. Conduct a thorough background check that includes a review of credit history, criminal records, and verification of professional licenses and certifications, with the candidate's explicit written consent. Option D. Initiate a background check that includes a review of credit history, criminal records, and verification of professional licenses and certifications, without obtaining explicit written consent from the candidate. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough background check that includes a review of credit history, criminal records, and verification of professional licenses and certifications, with the candidate's explicit written consent. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a security leader to balance the organization's legitimate need for information to ensure a safe and secure workplace with the fundamental rights of prospective employees. Making an overly broad or intrusive inquiry during the hiring process can lead to legal repercussions, damage the company's reputation, and deter qualified candidates. The core of the challenge lies in identifying the precise scope of information that is both relevant to assessing a candidate's suitability for a security-sensitive role and legally permissible to obtain. The correct approach involves conducting a targeted background check that is directly related to the specific security responsibilities of the role. This means focusing on verifiable information that indicates a candidate's trustworthiness and ability to handle sensitive information or access restricted areas. This approach is justified by employment law principles that prohibit discrimination and require employers to have a legitimate, job-related reason for any background inquiries. Specifically, in the U.S. context, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, FCRA, governs the use of consumer reports for employment purposes, requiring consent and adherence to strict procedures. Furthermore, various state laws and Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EOC, guidelines emphasize that background checks should not be used in a discriminatory manner and should be narrowly tailored to the job requirements. An incorrect approach would be to conduct a comprehensive background check that includes extensive personal details unrelated to the job, such as social media activity, that is not publicly accessible or inquiries into past medical history. This approach fails to respect employee privacy rights and could lead to claims of invasion of privacy or discrimination if the information obtained is used to make an adverse hiring decision without a clear, job-related justification. Another incorrect approach would be to bypass standard legal procedures, such as failing to obtain proper consent before conducting a background check or not providing adverse action notices as required by the FCRA. This directly violates federal law and exposes the organization to significant legal penalties and reputational damage. A third incorrect approach would be to rely solely on informal inquiries or rumors about a candidate's past, as this is not a reliable or legally defensible method of assessing suitability and can lead to biased decision-making. A professional decision-making process for such situations should involve a thorough understanding of applicable federal and state employment laws, including those governing background checks and privacy. Security leaders should consult with legal counsel to ensure that hiring practices and background check procedures are compliant. A risk-based approach, focusing on the specific security needs of the role and the potential risks associated with a candidate, is essential. This involves defining clear criteria for background checks that are directly linked to job duties and responsibilities, ensuring transparency with candidates about the process, and maintaining strict confidentiality of all information obtained. Question 14. Benchmark analysis indicates that a security leader is informed by a confidential source that an employee may be exfiltrating sensitive company data using a personal USB drive. The employee is observed leaving the premises with their personal bag. The security leader has a strong suspicion, but no direct evidence of the employee actively transferring data at that moment. What is the most legally and ethically sound course of action for the security leader to pursue? Option A. Access the employee's work computer remotely to check for recent file transfer logs and then confront the employee with any findings. Option B. Detain the employee and conduct a thorough search of their person and belongings to ensure no data is being removed. Option C. Immediately stop the employee, inform them of the suspicion, and request to search their personal bag and the USB drive. Option D. Discreetly follow the employee to observe their actions outside the premises and report any further suspicious behavior to management and legal counsel for guidance. Correct answer is C. Immediately stop the employee, inform them of the suspicion, and request to search their personal bag and the USB drive. Explanation. This scenario presents a common ethical and legal challenge for security professionals, balancing the need to investigate a potential security breach with the imperative to respect individual rights and adhere to legal boundaries regarding search and seizure. The challenge lies in the ambiguity of the situation and the potential for overreach, which could lead to legal repercussions and damage to the organization's reputation. The security leader must exercise sound judgment, informed by legal frameworks and ethical principles, to navigate this situation effectively. The correct approach involves a measured response that prioritizes gathering information through legal and ethical means, while minimizing intrusion and respecting privacy. This approach acknowledges the limitations of security personnel's authority in conducting searches and emphasizes the importance of involving appropriate authorities when necessary. It aligns with the principle of proportionality, ensuring that any action taken is commensurate with the perceived threat and legal authority. An incorrect approach that involves immediate, intrusive search of the employee's personal belongings without clear probable cause or legal justification would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could violate privacy laws and potentially lead to civil liability for the organization. Similarly, an approach that involves confronting the employee aggressively and making accusations without sufficient evidence could constitute defamation or harassment, again leading to legal issues. Another incorrect approach, that of ignoring the potential threat entirely due to fear of legal repercussions, would be a failure in the duty of care and could expose the organization to greater risk if a breach were indeed occurring. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a structured approach. 1. Assess the situation, gather all available information, and evaluate the credibility and severity of the potential threat. 2. Consult internal policies and legal counsel. Review the organization's security policies and consult with legal advisors to understand the scope of authority and legal limitations. 3. Determine the appropriate course of action. Based on the assessment and legal guidance, decide on the least intrusive yet effective method to investigate. This might involve observation, questioning, or involving law enforcement. 4. Document all actions. Maintain detailed records of all observations, decisions, and actions taken. 5. Respect individual rights. Ensure all actions are conducted with due regard for the employee's privacy and legal rights. Question 15. Research into the physical security infrastructure of a financial institution operating under UK regulations and CSLP guidelines reveals that while the organization employs advanced CCTV surveillance and robust access control systems, the perimeter lighting in certain low-traffic areas is inconsistent and does not meet the minimum lux levels specified in the relevant guidance for deterring unauthorized access and aiding in incident investigation. The security leadership team is considering a proposal to defer upgrades to this lighting due to budget constraints, arguing that the existing systems are generally effective. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and professional obligations for the Certified Security Leadership Professional, CSLP, in this scenario? Option A. Accept the current lighting levels as sufficient, given the overall effectiveness of other security measures, and document the decision as a calculated risk, focusing budget on other perceived higher priority security enhancements. Option B. Immediately implement a plan to upgrade the perimeter lighting to meet the specified lux levels, prioritizing regulatory compliance over immediate cost savings, and explore phased implementation or alternative funding if necessary. Option C. Defer the lighting upgrades indefinitely, citing budget constraints, and focus solely on maintaining the existing advanced CCTV and access control systems, as these are considered the primary security assets. Option D. Rely on industry best practices for perimeter lighting, assuming that general security principles will satisfy the spirit of the regulation, and postpone formal upgrades until a major security incident necessitates immediate action. The correct answer is B. Immediately implement a plan to upgrade the perimeter lighting to meet the specified lux levels, prioritizing regulatory compliance over immediate cost savings, and explore phased implementation or alternative funding if necessary. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in security leadership, balancing operational efficiency with stringent regulatory compliance, particularly concerning physical security measures. The professional challenge lies in interpreting and applying specific regulatory requirements to a dynamic environment, ensuring that implemented controls are not only effective, but also legally sound and ethically defensible. The need for careful judgment arises from the potential for significant penalties, reputational damage, and compromised security posture if compliance is not maintained. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and direct application of the relevant regulatory framework. This means identifying the specific clauses within the applicable legislation that dictate requirements for access control, surveillance, perimeter security, and lighting, and then ensuring the organization's policies and procedures align precisely with these mandates. This approach is correct because it demonstrates adherence to the law, which is a fundamental ethical and professional obligation for any security leader. Specifically, it ensures that the organization is not only meeting minimum standards, but also proactively mitigating risks as defined by the governing body. An incorrect approach would be to rely on industry best practices or general security principles without verifying their alignment with the specific regulatory requirements. While best practices are valuable, they do not supersede legal obligations. Failure to consult and adhere to the precise wording and intent of the regulations can lead to non-compliance, even if the implemented measures appear robust from a general security perspective. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize cost savings over regulatory mandates. While fiscal responsibility is important, it cannot justify non-compliance with legally binding security standards. Implementing substandard or insufficient controls due to budget constraints is a direct violation of regulatory duties and exposes the organization to significant risks. A further incorrect approach would be to assume that existing security measures are compliant without periodic review and validation against current regulations. Regulatory landscapes evolve, and what was compliant yesterday may not be compliant today. A failure to conduct regular audits and updates based on the latest legal requirements is a significant oversight. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. 1. Identify the applicable regulatory framework. 2. Conduct a gap analysis between current security measures and regulatory requirements. 3. Consult legal counsel or compliance experts if interpretation is unclear. 4. Develop and implement corrective actions to achieve full compliance. 5. Establish a schedule for ongoing monitoring and periodic reassessment of compliance. 6. Document all compliance activities and decisions. Question 16. The efficiency study reveals that the current incident response plan for data breaches lacks a defined process for assessing potential civil liability and engaging legal counsel during the initial stages of an incident. This oversight could lead to delayed or inadequate responses, potentially increasing the organization's exposure to negligence claims and breach of contract disputes. Which of the following approaches best addresses this identified deficiency from a civil law and liability perspective? Option A. Rely solely on the IT security team's understanding of data privacy regulations to determine notification requirements and potential legal risks without involving legal counsel. Option B. Implement a mandatory legal review of all incident response documentation and communication logs before any external notifications are made, and proactively engage external legal counsel to assess potential liabilities and advise on notification strategies. Option C. Immediately focus on technical containment and eradication of the threat, deferring any legal assessment until the incident is fully resolved and operations are restored. Option D. Prioritize the restoration of affected systems and services above all else, with legal considerations addressed only if formal legal action is initiated by a third party. The correct answer is C. Immediately focus on technical containment and eradication of the threat, deferring any legal assessment until the incident is fully resolved and operations are restored. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a potential gap in the organization's incident response process, specifically concerning the handling of data breaches that could lead to civil liability. This scenario is professionally challenging because security leaders must balance rapid incident containment with meticulous documentation and legal compliance. Failure to properly manage a data breach can expose the organization to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and legal action from affected individuals or regulatory bodies. The core challenge lies in understanding and applying the principles of tort law negligence, breach of duty of care, and contract law obligations to customers, partners, or under service level agreements within the context of a security incident, and how these translate into actionable liability. The correct approach involves a proactive and legally informed incident response strategy. This means establishing clear protocols for evidence preservation, timely notification to affected parties as mandated by relevant regulations, e.g., GDPR if applicable to the jurisdiction, or specific national data protection laws, and engaging legal counsel early to assess potential liabilities. This approach is right because it directly addresses the potential for negligence claims by demonstrating reasonable care in protecting data and responding to breaches. It also upholds contractual obligations and minimizes the likelihood of regulatory enforcement actions. Adhering to established legal frameworks and best practices in incident response is paramount for mitigating civil liability. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed of containment over thorough documentation and legal consultation. This could lead to the destruction or alteration of crucial evidence, hindering any subsequent investigation or defense against legal claims. Another incorrect approach is to delay or omit notifications to affected individuals or regulatory bodies, which can result in statutory penalties and further exacerbate legal exposure. Furthermore, attempting to manage the legal ramifications of a breach without consulting legal experts is a significant ethical and professional failing, as it demonstrates a lack of due diligence and an underestimation of the complex legal landscape. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that integrates legal and ethical considerations into every stage of incident response. This involves understanding the organization's legal obligation, maintaining a comprehensive incident response plan that includes legal review, and fostering strong communication channels with legal counsel and relevant stakeholders. When faced with a breach, the process should involve 1. Immediate containment and assessment. 2. Evidence preservation. 3. Legal consultation to understand notification requirements and potential liabilities. 4. Execution of legally compliant notifications and remediation. And 5. Post-incident review to improve processes and prevent recurrence. Question 17. Comparative studies suggest that effective security leadership in resource-constrained environments hinges on a leader's ability to justify security investments. When faced with competing demands for budget allocation, which of the following approaches best demonstrates a commitment to responsible and strategic security resource management? Option A. Prioritizing security initiatives that address the most frequently reported security incidents, regardless of their potential impact. Option B. Selecting the least expensive security solutions that meet minimum compliance requirements, even if they offer limited protection against significant threats. Option C. Allocating budget based on a detailed cost-benefit analysis that quantifies potential risk mitigation and aligns security investments with strategic business objectives. Option D. Distributing the security budget evenly across all proposed initiatives to ensure no single area feels neglected. The correct answer is A. Prioritizing security initiatives that address the most frequently reported security incidents, regardless of their potential impact. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a security leader to balance competing demands for limited resources while demonstrating the value of security investments to stakeholders who may not fully understand its strategic importance. The leader must navigate the inherent tension between proactive risk mitigation and immediate operational needs, all within a defined budget. Careful judgment is required to ensure that resource allocation aligns with the organization's risk appetite, strategic objectives, and regulatory obligations, rather than simply reacting to perceived threats or succumbing to pressure from vocal stakeholders. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven cost-benefit analysis that quantifies the potential impact of security risks and the return on investment for proposed security measures. This approach aligns with best practices in security leadership by demonstrating accountability and strategic alignment. Specifically, it supports the principle of proportionality in security spending, ensuring that resources are allocated where they will yield the greatest reduction in risk relative to cost. This is ethically sound as it prioritizes the protection of organizational assets and stakeholder interests in a responsible manner. From a regulatory perspective, while specific CSLP jurisdiction regulations are not provided, generally accepted principles of good governance and due diligence mandate that management make informed decisions regarding resource allocation, which this approach facilitates. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on addressing the most visible or vocal stakeholder concerns, without a thorough risk assessment or cost-benefit analysis, is professionally unacceptable. This can lead to misallocation of resources, investing in solutions that do not address the most significant risks, and potentially failing to meet regulatory compliance requirements due to a lack of strategic focus. It also undermines the credibility of the security function by appearing reactive rather than proactive and strategic. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes the cheapest available solutions without considering their effectiveness or long-term viability is also professionally unsound. This often results in inadequate security controls that fail to mitigate risks effectively, leading to potential breaches and significant financial or reputational damage. Such an approach neglects the fundamental responsibility of a security leader to ensure adequate protection, potentially violating ethical duties to protect organizational assets and failing to meet the spirit, if not the letter, of any applicable regulatory frameworks that require reasonable security measures. Finally, an approach that allocates budget based on historical spending patterns without reevaluating current risks and strategic priorities is a failure of leadership. This can lead to outdated security measures and a failure to adapt to evolving threat landscapes. It demonstrates a lack of strategic foresight and an inability to justify security investments based on current business needs and risk profiles, which is a critical failing in demonstrating the value of the security function and ensuring compliance with any governance frameworks that require periodic review and adaptation of security strategies. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the organization's risk landscape, strategic objectives, and regulatory obligations. This should be followed by a rigorous process of identifying, assessing, and prioritizing risks. Security initiatives should then be developed and evaluated based on their ability to mitigate these prioritized risks, with a clear articulation of the expected benefits and costs. Regular review and adaptation of the security budget and resource allocation are essential to ensure continued alignment with organizational needs and the evolving threat environment. Question 18. System analysis indicates that a significant portion of the organization's budget is allocated to business continuity and disaster recovery initiatives. To demonstrate immediate cost savings, a proposal is put forth to reduce the frequency of disaster recovery testing and to scale back the scope of the next business impact analysis, focusing only on IT infrastructure. As a certified security leadership professional operating under UK regulatory frameworks and CSLP guidelines, what is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Implement a reactive disaster recovery strategy, focusing on IT system recovery only and deferring comprehensive business impact analysis and testing until after a disruptive event occurs to minimize upfront investment. Option B. Increase the focus on IT system recovery and reduce business continuity planning efforts to focus solely on the technical aspects of disaster recovery, assuming that resilience directly translates to overall business resilience. Option C. Approve the reduction in disaster recovery testing frequency and the scaled-back business impact analysis, prioritizing immediate cost savings while relying on the existing, albeit less frequently tested, disaster recovery plans. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive business impact analysis, BIA, to identify critical business functions, their recovery time objectives, RTO, and recovery point objectives, RPO, and use this data to justify the current or a revised testing schedule and scope, ensuring alignment with regulatory requirements for operational resilience. Correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive business impact analysis, BIA, to identify critical business functions, their recovery time objectives, RTO, and recovery point objectives, RPO, and use this data to justify the current or a revised testing schedule and scope, ensuring alignment with regulatory requirements for operational resilience. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a security leader to balance immediate operational needs with long-term strategic resilience, all while adhering to specific regulatory mandates. The pressure to demonstrate cost savings can lead to short-sighted decisions that compromise the organization's ability to withstand disruptive events. Careful judgment is required to ensure that risk mitigation efforts are proportionate and aligned with business objectives and regulatory expectations. The correct approach involves a comprehensive business impact analysis, BIA, as the foundational step. A BIA systematically identifies critical business functions, assesses the potential impact of disruptions on these functions, and determines recovery time objectives, RTO, and recovery point objectives, RPO. This analysis directly informs the development of proportionate and effective business continuity plans, BCP, and disaster recovery plans, DRP. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing financial services or critical infrastructure, often mandate such analyses to ensure operational resilience and the continuity of essential services. For example, in the UK, the Financial Conduct Authority, FCA, Handbook e.g. CISC 10, requires firms to have robust systems and controls, including business continuity arrangements, to ensure continuity of services. A BIA is the essential precursor to meeting these requirements by identifying what needs to be protected and to what extent. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize immediate cost reduction by simply reducing the frequency of disaster recovery testing without a thorough risk assessment. This fails to acknowledge that testing is a critical validation mechanism for the effectiveness of DR plans. Regulatory bodies expect organizations to not only have plans, but also to demonstrate their viability through regular, realistic testing. A reduction in testing without a documented, risk-based justification that still meets regulatory requirements would be a significant failure. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on IT system recovery without considering the broader business processes and human elements. While IT is crucial, business continuity encompasses all aspects of an organization's operations, including personnel, facilities, supply chains, and communication. Overlooking these non-IT components, as mandated by many BCP frameworks and regulations that emphasize end-to-end service delivery, would lead to an incomplete and ineffective continuity strategy. Finally, Adopting a wait-and-see approach, where disaster recovery plans are only developed after an incident occurs, is fundamentally flawed and often in direct violation of regulatory expectations. Proactive planning and preparedness are core tenets of security leadership and regulatory compliance. Regulations typically require organizations to have established plans and capabilities before a disruptive event, not to develop them in the aftermath. This reactive stance demonstrates a severe lack of foresight and a failure to meet due diligence obligations. Professionals should employ a structured risk management framework. This involves 1. Understanding the regulatory landscape and its specific requirements for business continuity and disaster recovery. 2. Conducting a thorough BIA to identify critical functions and their impact tolerances. 3. Developing BCPs and DRPs that are proportionate to the identified risks and regulatory mandates. 4. Implementing a robust testing and exercise program to validate plan effectiveness. 5. Regularly reviewing and updating plans based on test results, changes in the business environment, and evolving threats. This systematic, risk-informed, and compliance-driven approach ensures that resilience efforts are both effective and defensible. Question 19. Regulatory review indicates that a critical security incident has occurred, requiring immediate response and extensive stakeholder communication. As the Certified Security Leadership Professional, CSLP, you need to ensure that information flows effectively and accurately to all relevant parties while maintaining team cohesion and adherence to established protocols. Which of the following leadership approaches best addresses this implementation challenge? Option A. Instruct the incident response team to focus solely on technical remediation and defer all communication responsibilities to a later stage, once the incident is fully resolved and all technical details are confirmed. Option B. Personally handle all outgoing communications to maintain complete control over the narrative, providing updates only when you have definitive and complete information, even if it delays initial notifications. Option C. Immediately establish a dedicated incident communication team. Delegate specific reporting responsibilities to pre-identified individuals based on their expertise, and set up a central repository for all outgoing communications to ensure consistency and auditability. Option D. Rely on informal communication channels, such as instant messaging and individual phone calls, to disseminate information quickly to key stakeholders as it becomes available, assuming team members will relay necessary details to others. Correct answer is C. Immediately establish a dedicated incident communication team. Delegate specific reporting responsibilities to pre-identified individuals based on their expertise, and set up a central repository for all outgoing communication to ensure consistency and auditability. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge for security leaders, balancing the need for rapid incident response with the imperative to maintain consistent and auditable communication, especially when regulatory compliance is a factor. The professional challenge lies in the inherent tension between urgency and process, where a leader's communication style can either exacerbate or mitigate the situation. Effective leadership in such a crisis requires not only technical understanding, but also strong interpersonal and strategic skills to guide the team, manage stakeholder expectations, and ensure adherence to established protocols. The correct approach involves a leader proactively establishing a clear communication channel and delegating specific roles for information dissemination. This demonstrates strategic thinking by anticipating the need for structured updates and conflict resolution, by ensuring all parties receive accurate information, thereby preventing rumors and misinformation. It also fosters motivation by empowering team members with defined responsibilities. This approach aligns with the principles of responsible leadership and the need for documented, transparent communication, often mandated by regulatory frameworks that require evidence of due diligence and incident management. An incorrect approach that relies on informal, ad hoc communication risks creating confusion and inconsistencies. This can lead to regulatory noncompliance if official reporting requirements are not met, or if the information disseminated is inaccurate or incomplete. Another incorrect approach, where the leader attempts to control all communication personally without delegation, can lead to bottlenecks, burnout, and a failure to leverage the expertise of the team. This demonstrates poor delegation and strategic thinking, potentially hindering effective decision-making and team motivation. A third incorrect approach, which involves withholding information from certain stakeholders, can erode trust and lead to significant ethical and regulatory breaches, particularly in environments with strict disclosure obligations. Professionals should approach such situations by first assessing the criticality of the incident and identifying key stakeholders. They should then establish a communication plan that outlines who communicates what to whom and when, ensuring all communication is accurate, timely, and documented. Delegation of specific communication tasks to competent team members with clear oversight is crucial for efficiency and effectiveness. This structured approach ensures that leadership skills like communication, delegation, and strategic thinking are applied in a manner that supports both operational needs and regulatory compliance. Question 20. Consider a scenario where a certified security leadership professional, CSLP, is tasked with conducting a comprehensive risk assessment for a financial services organization. The organization operates in a highly regulated environment with strict data privacy and cybersecurity mandates. The CSLP has limited time and budget for the assessment, but must deliver a report that identifies key risks and proposes effective mitigation strategies to the board of directors within 6 weeks. The CSLP needs to select an appropriate methodology for threat identification, vulnerability analysis, and risk mitigation. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the professional responsibilities and regulatory expectations for a CSLP in this context? Option A. Conduct a purely qualitative risk assessment, relying solely on the subjective opinions of IT and security staff to identify threats and vulnerabilities, without any systematic analysis or consideration of external threat intelligence. Option B. Prioritize the assessment on identifying and mitigating only those threats that have the highest potential financial impact, even if their likelihood of occurrence is extremely low, to satisfy the board's concern for major financial losses. Option C. Utilize a hybrid methodology that combines a review of industry-specific threat intelligence, a thorough vulnerability scan of critical systems, and a qualitative impact assessment for identified risks, followed by a prioritized list of mitigation strategies based on a combination of likelihood and potential business impact. Option D. Focus exclusively on analyzing past security incidents and breaches within the organization to identify recurring threat patterns and vulnerabilities, assuming that future threats will mirror historical events. Correct answer is C. Utilize a hybrid methodology that combines a review of industry-specific threat intelligence, a thorough vulnerability scan of critical systems, and a qualitative impact assessment for identified risks, followed by a prioritized list of mitigation strategies based on a combination of likelihood and potential business impact. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in security leadership, balancing the need for comprehensive risk assessment with the practical constraints of limited resources and time. The CSLP professional must navigate the inherent subjectivity in threat identification and vulnerability analysis, while ensuring the chosen methodology aligns with established best practices and regulatory expectations for a robust risk management program. The pressure to deliver actionable insights quickly without compromising the integrity of the assessment adds significant complexity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured, multifaceted risk assessment that integrates qualitative and quantitative methods where appropriate, focusing on identifying both known and potential threats and vulnerabilities relevant to the organization's specific context and assets. This methodology, aligned with frameworks like ISO 31000 Risk Management Guidelines and the NIST Risk Management Framework, RMF, which are foundational to many security leadership certifications, emphasizes a systematic process. It requires the professional to not only identify threats and vulnerabilities, but also to analyze their likelihood and potential impact, leading to the development of prioritized mitigation strategies. This comprehensive approach ensures that resources are allocated effectively to address the most significant risks, fulfilling the ethical obligation to protect organizational assets and comply with any applicable data protection or security regulations that mandate such due diligence. Incorrect approach is analysis. Focusing solely on historical incident data for threat identification is an incomplete approach. While historical data is valuable, it fails to account for emerging threats, novel attack vectors, or changes in the threat landscape that may not have manifested in past incidents. This can lead to a false sense of security and leave the organization exposed to new risks, violating the duty of care expected of a security leader. Prioritizing only high-impact, low-likelihood threats without considering the frequency or ease of exploitation of lower-impact threats is also problematic. This can lead to misallocation of resources, neglecting more common or easily preventable vulnerabilities that, in aggregate, could cause significant disruption or financial loss. It demonstrates a lack of comprehensive risk understanding and potentially fails to meet regulatory requirements for a balanced risk mitigation strategy. Adopting a purely qualitative assessment without any attempt to quantify potential impacts or likelihoods, even through estimations, can result in subjective and inconsistent risk rankings. This lack of objective grounding makes it difficult to justify resource allocation decisions to senior management and may not satisfy regulatory expectations for demonstrable due diligence and risk-based decision-making. Professional reasoning. Security leaders must employ a systematic and adaptable risk management process. This involves understanding the organization's specific operating environment, assets, and objectives. The chosen methodology should be robust enough to identify a broad spectrum of threats and vulnerabilities, considering both historical data and forward-looking intelligence. A balanced approach that integrates qualitative and quantitative analysis, where feasible, allows for effective prioritization of risks and the development of proportionate mitigation strategies. Professionals should continuously review and update their risk assessments to reflect changes in the threat landscape and organizational context, ensuring ongoing compliance and effective protection of assets.